Hello and welcome to the Leaders Lounge podcast. My name is Simon Cohen, founder of Cohesis, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Peter Stubbs, CEO of the Shire of Williams. Welcome, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. It's a pleasure to be with you and have another chat. Good to catch up with you.
Absolutely, and thank you for your time. So to kick things off, Peter, please could you share a little bit about your background and what brought you into local government and the Shire of Williams?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is I'm one of the minority of Australians, the 20% of Australians who choose to live not in an urban area. And so I have worked most of my career in regional Western Australia, and that's a conscious choice. So I guess I started off with a degree in environmental science and joined the Department of Agriculture and worked there in the wheat belt of Western Australia in the Kimberley for quite a lot of years. And it was about 1999 when the town of Mora had 3 successive floods that I got involved with local government. So I joined the local government in the year 2000 on the back of those floods I guess in a moment where the community of Mora was attempting to re-establish and consolidate following the impact of the floods. And so I had an appreciation that local government plays a key role in regional communities in terms of leadership, advocacy, and in sort of enabling a community to be the best it can be. And that's what led me almost by accident into local government.
Yeah, and
So since that time, I guess I've stepped in and out of local government at various times.
yeah.
After 10 years in local government, I went to work for the state government in various roles, and then more recently in the private sector, and now back into local government at the Shire of Williams.
And so what does your current role involve on a day-to-day basis then? How is the Shire of Williams different and also similar to the roles that you've had elsewhere then?
Well, really, on a day-to-day basis, I think all people working in local government are managing a very diverse range of community infrastructure and activities. So, it can range from looking after road networks and recreation facilities to managing waste services, childcare, libraries,
Yeah.
the whole range of. So the diversity of the industry appeals to me. And I think it's one of the great challenges in most local governments, particularly regional ones, is trying to do more with a limited amount of resource. So
Yeah.
that's one of the greatest challenges, and that's a common challenge right across the local government sector, I would think. Williams is a bit smaller than the local governments I've worked in before, and that brings some unique challenges because you don't quite have the depth of skill sets that you might have in a larger council. You don't have potentially, for example, town planners and engineers on staff that you might have in a larger organisation. So there's a bit of a requirement to be a bit of a jack of all trade when you get down to a small council like the Shire of Williams.
Yeah, no, I can understand. And what makes Williams different, would you say, in terms of its either proximity, or what makes Williams special and unique?
Yeah, well, it's a very in terms of European settlement, Williams was one of the early settlements in Western Australia, and it's always been a crossroads for people transiting north, south, and east, west. And I guess 200 years after European settlement, that is still the case. So we have about 4,500 people, vehicles a day, come down the Albany Highway, moving
Yeah.
between the Great Southern and Albany and Perth. So that makes it a bit unique. It's proximity on the highway. It's a very reliable farming district, and agriculture remains our predominant industry. Has been since European settlement and continues to be. So a lot of what we do in terms of particularly our road networks are very much done with the thought in mind that we're supporting local agriculture, but also that's part of a global industry. So we're trying to get product in and out
Yeah.
to support that industry, and that has to be globally competitive. So the transport network, the reliability, the efficiency of it is crucial to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And so back to yourself, as I suppose, a little bit. How has um, working in a regional local government shaped your approach to leadership? You've mentioned you've had roles in state government, in local government, different sizes of local government, in industry. In terms of your approach to leadership, have you had to change your approach? Has it evolved? And you mentioned also people and staff coming into a shire of your size have to be a jack of all trades. Does that mean that you've had to change your philosophy or view in terms of leadership?
Yes, I think that well, I've come to learn over the years, I guess, in local government that developing people, it's just not practical to be able to compete in the open market for the people and skills that you might need. So you often you try to recruit locally as much as you can, and that means that it's inevitable that you need to invest in people and help them develop in their careers and skill sets to do the jobs that they need to do and can be the best they can be. So also probably I think there are times where local government really needs to stand up, because it's very easy in a regional setting for well-meaning people in decision makers in urban areas, urban parts of Australia, to get overrun. You know, it's colloquially called you get amnesia. If you come into a regional town, you know, you live in the moment and you're listening and you're hearing the things that are important to local people, but very quickly you get busy in the rest of your life as soon as you leave that town. And
Yeah.
so the country people would refer that to as, well, they've got amnesia. But the reality is that people just get busy and overrun. And so I guess my leadership is that you appreciate in these sort of smaller regional towns that you need to be a strong advocate at times. You need to really stand up and push very persistently and forcefully at times what is needed by those people in those country areas.
Yeah. And then I suppose branching out a bit to the community, how do you maintain a strong sense of community in a smaller shire like Williams? Because you mentioned agriculture, you mentioned it's very much focused on business, but at the same time, it's a small shire. So what initiatives or what do you do specifically to maintain that sense of community in the shire?
Well, the first thing I'd say about Williams is that it has a extremely strong sense of identity.
Yeah.
And that, I think, comes from a number of sources. It's volunteer and sporting clubs. So volunteerism is a big part of that identity. So Williams sports clubs are very strong. They have other clubs like Repertory, so John Ambulance, the Bushfire Brigades,
Yeah.
all of those sort of social networks in the area of Williams, extremely strong. So I think its identity and community spirit comes from those sort of areas organically. So Williams, the Shire role in that is to try and support those volunteers as best we can in a variety of ways. So that might be making sure they've got good infrastructure, good vehicles, good, you know, if you talk bushfire brigades, making sure they're well resourced so they can do the job. In terms of communities, hosting various community events or resourcing volunteers so that they can host the community events and take ownership of those things. So a lot of that is Shire role is about resourcing people to do the things that the community wants.
And do you get much support from state government or the private sector in any of those endeavours?
Local government couldn't really function without the Australian government and state government. So there is a lot of support that comes in a variety of ways, most particularly through funding initiatives. Most local governments cannot survive and operate on their own financial means, their own rate base, for example. They inevitably need funding injections for specific projects and that. So that's a big part of it. The private sector is quite variable. You know that there are many private companies who are very generous in their support of regional communities, and there are other larger companies that do what they have to do to sort of appease their shareholders and create some sort of social license. So larger mining companies, resource companies, and those sort of things. The contribution back to local communities is relatively small compared to the royalties they pay to the state government. and they're there to make business, to make a return to shareholders. So we're very mindful of that.
No, indeed. And are there any kind of recent projects of that nature that have happened in Williams that you'd care to mention?
Yeah, well, I think that we're on the cusp of the renewable energy transition that's talked about a lot in society. So there are at the moment 4 wind farm proponents that are, trying to get projects out of the ground in the Williams district. So that's potentially 400 or 500 wind turbines, new transmission lines. So that's a significant change to the landscape and to the community. So we are in discussions with those companies and the state government around what that means for community benefits, for example. So in that renewable chain evolution that's going on, there will be some financial benefits to landholders, farming landholders that host wind turbines on their properties, and that's great for those that want that. But there's also the issue about what sort of benefit is there to a community where the electricity is being generated for the greater good of Western Australia. So we are collaborating with our local government peers because there's quite a lot of local governments that are also in the same space that Shire of Williams is in that regard. And there's some pretty well designed guidelines as to what community benefits might eventuate in the years ahead as these projects get commissioned.
Yeah, you mentioned like with wind farms and things like that, and the benefit in terms of, say, energy creation and so forth. What about are there any knock-on effects with things such as housing developments and tourism or anything like that? Do you see that being a kind of spin-off from some of these projects?
Yeah, well, there's a construction phase for these sorts of projects, and that often involves several hundred construction workers. And so there is a relatively short-term need for construction accommodation, and that's difficult to find in many regional areas without adding in construction camp type facilities. And, our preference would be that those camp facilities are based in towns on existing infrastructure, so services like sewer, power, water, and potentially to leverage tourism through that construction phase in the longer term. So that's an opportunity we're exploring with the various wind farm proponents. Tourism, from a general point of view of tourism, the whole area around Williams, almost from the metropolitan area and the Peel to Narrogin to Katanning, is relatively undiscovered from a tourism perspective. It's about the same distance from Perth and the Peel as what the Yarra Valley is from Melbourne. It's a similar distance, similar topography, climatically, but we don't yet have the product on the ground, as much product on the ground that the mainstream tourism market would be seeking. So that's a work in progress for us. It might take several decades for us to capitalise on that if we are to. But we do have some steps going on. There's a private development of a significant caravan park tourism facility at Quindanning, just to the west of Williams. And so we're very excited about that, and we think that'll play an important role establishing another accommodation facility that ultimately services the tourism growth of market.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in terms of that growth and the services that you provide for the community within the Shire, what kind of role does technology play, and how is the role of technology evolving with the Shire?
Well, we're on a fairly steep curve with technology because we're coming off a relatively low base. So some of our systems are not as functional and modern as we would have liked. So we're in the process of introducing a new ERP system and various modern applications that will streamline workflow and workloads. So we're pretty excited about that because that's going to have quite a transformational effect on the way we do business, our efficiencies and productivity. So we expect that to lift quite a bit over the next 12 to 18 months as we roll all that in.
Yeah, and
the backbone of a lot of that ultimately is is the internet and
Yeah.
data capability.
Yeah.
All technology like that is linking back to the backbone of the internet and data. So that's critical as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and maybe a bit early yet, but I mean, I know from obviously some of the work that we've done together previously, in looking at some of these things. What do you see as being the key challenges to making that leap from where you have been to where you want to get to?
Yeah, I think from a general, I'll talk firstly about just generally in the local government sector, particularly for smaller local governments. Part of the challenge is just having the resource
Yeah,
to put into making the change. Um, and for Williams in particular, having the skill sets and the personnel on board to lead and take you on that journey. Um, so that's been something that we've had to be a bit patient with to build our skill sets and get ourselves in a point that we're ready to embrace more technology. I think that's probably the case for quite a lot of local governments.
yeah,
There's two factors. You've got to have the resource to be able to implement change, and you've got to have the appetite and people in the right frame of mind to embrace the opportunities that are out there. And so we're now poised to do that, but that's taken a little bit of time.
no, absolutely, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, for many of these things, that yes, okay, there's a significant technology change, but it's really around having the right people and the right mindset, and having enough people as well, having enough capacity. My experience of working with with regional local governments is that everybody's busy, everybody's got a lot to do on their plates. Maybe sometimes this busyness is because of inefficiencies and lack of technology, but they still need the time and the headspace to be able to take on change, to onboard change. And then with that, it's the approach to change management so that they can embrace that change. And I think you're
Yeah,
absolutely right.
that's exactly right. That's exactly how I see it. That most local governments are well-meaning and want to evolve and want to make the best of the technologies available, but they sometimes they struggle with just lining things up and getting the skill sets they need and the people in the right headspace. But most local governments I speak to, they're very open to the idea of what else is out there that can make
Yes.
our jobs more efficient, more productive. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, like I've nowhere near got the extensive experience in Australia and obviously in local government as you. I'm coming up to being 8 years in Australia, but even in the time I started working in supporting local governments in 2019. So it's 6 years, actually, just over 6 years that I've been kind of working in and around local governments. And I think over the last couple of years, I've noticed an increase in desire for change, pace of change in the regional local governments, I think there's an understanding that change needs to happen, not least because of ERP vendors who are there's movements in the market there, but also the with the I think to your point around the internet being the absolute fundamental technology that's
Yeah.
required to enable this change, that people are connecting with faster pipelines, they can do more things, and so it opens up possibilities. I think the next step in this space is as you say, that local governments need to mature to be able to, okay, how do we embrace change and how do we deliver change effectively? And that's the next. And what kind of systems are right for each local government? And I think there's a lot of work in that space that is happening, but also that needs to be done as well. I've been close to a little bit of what you've been doing in Williams as well, and it's really good to see how that change is evolving, and the fact that you took the time to make the right decision, I suppose, as well, in terms of taking your time with your ERP selection and things like that to make sure it was right for the Shire. And I think you'll get the benefit from that as well, as you go down that path.
We're not alone in this journey, and we've been able to, in the case of our staff at the Shire of Williams, we're very grateful to the learnings we've had from our peers in local government and our interactions with them. We've learned a lot, and that's helped us in our decision making and I guess our level of comfort with our decision. Um, so yeah, we've seen what others have regard as successes and challenges and failures or things I'd like to do differently. It might be a better way to put it. So we've interacted with a number of regional local governments about those things, and even ones closer to the metropolitan area. So that's been extremely useful to us in making decisions about technology and the pace at which we can embrace it. I should say, though, that this sort of change conversation we're having is really not new. It's just a continuum, I think, in my mind. If we think about the last 100 years, we've gone from effectively horse and cart into tractors and motor vehicles, and even in the last 40 years, 30 years, we've embraced the internet and computing in a way that probably very few people imagined back in the 70s and 80s. So there's been a lot of change, and we're just seeing more of that. I think we're still, the internet and the digital age is still evolving, and we're learning that there's more and more opportunity for us than we ever realised.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. And with that opportunity, there's always risk with that as well. And obviously in the digital space and the technology space where there's automation and AI coming in now, what are your views around AI adoption for the Shire, and how far have you gone with AI, or is it still very much on the early days and watching, or are you jumping in?
No, I think that I wouldn't say that we're jumping in, but I think for all people, we use more AI than we realise just in our everyday life. People are using, AI navigators in their car when they're driving around routinely. They're using AI in their houses to control air conditioning and security cameras and all sorts of stuff. So we're all using AI to some degree in society, but we're yet to embrace AI anywhere near to its full capacity. I'm certain about that. But I think in the future, the collection of monitoring of infrastructure, particularly roads and those sorts of things, we will inevitably use more AI. I think that's a trend that we're all on, and for good reason, because it's far more efficient and you're making better decisions, the better use of public funds, therefore. So I can see a good reason why we'll embrace more AI in that space.
Yeah, and I suppose with the likes of AI, automation, changing systems and platforms, and the increasing scope to do more with technology, how do you see the governance challenges, which are obviously necessary to a certain degree, but they obviously also place a compliance burden on local governments generally? How do you view that within the context of the Shire of Williams, with things like cybersecurity, essentially PRIS, which is coming in, and things like that from a technology, security, data, privacy perspectives? How is the Shire kind of managing with that kind of compliance burden?
Yeah, so we work closely with an external provider who helps us manage our IT platforms. And in fact, the next meeting I have after our chat, Simon, is with our IT provider on site, very much about the Essential 8 journey. So we're talking to them about that and how we progress through the maturity levels of Essential 8. And that's I think for all organisations, there's going to be an increasing expectation that they are fairly well mature in terms of their cybersecurity, because we're all subject to potential cyber breaches and cyber attacks, and we have a responsibility with public data and information to take all reasonable steps to protect the integrity of that, make sure it's not misused. So that's a serious concern that we have, and I think the Auditor General in Western Australia expects all local governments to be going on that journey and making sure that the public data is secure. And we are audited on that. So we're very mindful of our governance requirements in that respect. But you talked about compliance a little bit. One of the great challenges of the local government industry is meeting all of the compliance for the myriad pieces of legislation that exist. So that is quite a burden and a workload that all local governments carry.
Yeah.
And so often they would like to do more creative things in the community for community benefit, But what pulls them back a bit is the need to continue to meet the compliance requirements.
Yeah.
So
And
that's a difficult thing to balance.
yeah, I was just going to say that. And how do you do that? Do you have any particular kind of techniques or approaches to that, or is it just a case of you have to put things on the back burner that you'd like to do because you actually have to allocate time for compliance, or is there, do you have any specific approach for that?
Yes, and I think that most smaller local governments like Williams would outsource various functions to external providers. So we collaborate with the Shire of Narrogin, with the City of Kalamunda, who are helping us with various compliance. So in the case of the City of Kalamunda, we would use their planning and building expertise to help
Yeah.
us make sure that planning and building regulations are met. In the case of Narrogin, we would use their environmental health and ranger services and things like that to make sure that various legislative compliance issues are addressed. So for some of that, we will contract in services and expertise to help make compliance.
Yeah. No, indeed. You mentioned before around, sometimes it's difficult to attract people in regional local government. And I've had these kind of similar chats with other regional CEOs and so forth. And it's a common kind of issue. What advice would you give to those people seeking to get into local government, or, what kind of steps would you recommend that people take who are potentially interested in serving their local communities to actually get started? Because, and just before you answer that, I remember when I first landed in Western Australia, it was like for and I've heard other people say this, it's quite hard to get in to the market in Western Australia because you don't have WA experience. What I heard, and people that I know heard that quite a lot. People with 20 years experience couldn't get a job in their field because they didn't have this WA experience. And it's a kind of similar thing in local government for an external coming in. It's hard to get local government experience if you don't have local government experience. And so, yeah, well, what kind of advice or tips or hints would you give to people who may be watching this or listening to this and thinking, yeah, I would like to serve my local community, but I just don't know how to get started or where to get started?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that I think the culture of any workplace is incredibly important to attracting and retaining people. And the workplace needs to meet the expectations. So relatively modern, good working conditions, good working spaces, have a collegial approach in the workplace. If those things are lacking, it's going to be more difficult to attract and retain people. And that sort of goes to the heart of the earlier conversation, I think, on technology. If you are sort of technology poor in a workplace, then your ability to attract and retain, particularly the younger demographic, is going to be quite difficult. So you need to evolve with your technology to be an attractive employer and an attractive workplace. But from a local government perspective, I think in regional areas, they're usually keen to employ local as much as they can. And there are good reasons for that, because people are more likely to stay longer. Often they come with their own accommodation, and that can be a big issue if you're bringing in people external to a region. Is there housing available? So from a cost structure point of view, and just having confidence that people will stay in your workplace longer, then we try and recruit locally. I'm sure most local governments do. But they're doing that for pragmatic reasons. But the diversity of the industry, so we might need pool managers, gardeners, plant operators to drive graders and loaders and trucks. We need childcare workers. We need people with strong skill sets in administration. So there's a variety of very diverse employment base. And so that presents good entry opportunities for people. So we've taken on people with, no experience in gardening or childcare, but put them on the training journey and the qualification journey. So I think that there are plenty of opportunities in the local government sector largely because of the diversity of the skill sets needed, professions.
Yeah. Okay. No, interesting. And I suppose one question that literally just occurred to me is, there's a lot, I think, going on with the Shire. We've mentioned technology, you've mentioned environmental energy, and what have you. If you could look ahead, say 3 to 5 years, and what have you, and you could like describe the Shire of Williams in the future in 3 to 5 years, how would you do that in terms of where do you think with the work that you're doing now will position the Shire in 3 to 5 years time? How would you describe that if you were to look into the future?
Well, it's a relatively short time, 3 to 5 years, but I think that we have a clear goal to create more opportunity for people to invest and grow business in Williams. So we're embarking on a industrial subdivision, and that will create the titles and lots for people to expand existing businesses in Williams to expand and grow. And we're getting strong signals from those businesses in town that they want to do that. But they're currently land constrained in that regard. So we're attempting to fix that. So to create the opportunity that'll create business growth and jobs, which causes a knock-on effect to housing, of course, and that's a good problem to have. I'm very happy that we've got a problem that we need more houses in town, because the alternative is not that pleasant.
Yeah,
that's where you've got a lot of vacant houses and nobody wants to be in that space. So we're doing a residential subdivision as well. So within 3 years, we should have completed both industrial and residential subdivisions, and that'll create some investment opportunity and growth for Williams. We've developed we're in the process of developing a 15-year plan to renew our sporting infrastructure in 3 or 4 stages. Stage 1 of that, we're kicking off with a tender at the end of this month. So we'll create an indoor court sport facility in Williams. So that's something we don't have at the moment.
Great.
And that's stage 1 of a 15-year plan to renew the infrastructure. Like all communities, you go through periods where the infrastructure is built, created, but has to be rebuilt and renewed. Our current sports pavilion, for example, is 34 years old. In another decade, it's 44 years old. And so what we'll need to do is think through, when you build a facility like that, you're really building it for the 50 years ahead. So for the generations that, not just for the people today, but for the next few generations. And it's the same with things like childcare. There's a great opportunity in Williams to think through how it sets up expanded childcare facilities in Williams for the growth of the population that we're starting to see. And when we build a new childcare, it doesn't need to be for 20 children as it is for today. It probably needs to be built for a population or a license for 40 children, and you grow into it. Because when you build civic buildings, you're generally building them for at least a 50-year lifespan, and more like 80.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
In the next 3 years, subdivisions to enable people to invest and the community to grow and consolidate. And stage 1 of renewal of some sporting infrastructure will be critical projects. But we'll start the planning on childcare as well and how we grow that. I mean, Williams, you asked earlier what's a bit unique about Williams. One of the unique things about Williams is the Shire of Williams is we have an outstanding group of staff that run childcare, and they have the skills and the capacity to provide support to family daycare centres in other parts of regional Western Australia. So they'll be in Northern and Beverley and even as far away as Broome, helping family daycare centres meet all their compliance and things they need to meet. And that's been very topical in the media lately, that are childcare facilities meeting all of the compliance requirements. So Williams plays a helpful role to other communities in family daycare centres. We service about 17 of those.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I didn't know that. That's great. Is there any one key message or takeaway you would like to leave with our viewers, either in terms of the Shire of Williams or local government specifically, or what have you?
I would say that I've found local government in my working career to be one of the most rewarding things that you can do in your career. your ability to see things from the start to finish that make a difference for a community is very real. Whereas when you're working in different levels of the public sector, it can take a lot longer and you're a lot more removed. You're playing a role in something, like in state government or federal government, you might play some sort of a role in helping a project along a journey, but you don't really get to appreciate how it's changed people's lives. In local government, you're very close to the people and you have a strong sense of, we're doing this for really good reasons, and you get to see and feel the impact it has on people's lives. And that's one of the things that I think that a lot of people in the local government industry are involved for that reason, I reckon.
Yeah. I absolutely echo that sentiment. I mean, coming from the UK, I've worked in some larger organizations, and since I arrived at the end of 2017, I worked in industry for a year in WA, and before I first got involved in local government, and ever since I got involved, as I said before, in 2019, I've really enjoyed trying to support those organizations that are trying to do good for the communities, and the people who work in those organizations really want to support their local communities, but somehow just need some support. And that's where I've really enjoyed providing that support wherever I can and do what have you. So I completely echo that sentiment. It's really nice to be able to help local communities just achieve that little bit more and work with those organizations that make that happen. So no, I completely agree with that. Anyhow, thank you for your time, Peter. And I'd just like to say that to anyone watching, if you enjoyed this conversation, please like and share it within your network, on your favorite podcast app. Leaders Lounge is here to deliver valuable insights that help business leaders make better decisions. And we do that by interviewing and having conversations with those people who have interesting insights to share. If you would like to appear on the podcast or address a particular topic, please contact leadersloungepodcast@cohesis.com.au. And other than that, Peter, I would just like to sincerely thank you for your time and for the insights that you've given today. And no doubt we will talk again, or I'll see you very soon in the near future. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thanks for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Peter.